The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this 7th webinar on the Secret Doctrine by Helena Blavatsky. This and all subsequent webinars will be, let me try to get my thing working here. There we go. Are available on makara.us under the subtitle Open Webinars. We've been over this before, so you can find past webinars there if you want to catch up. We begin each webinar by tracing HPB and Colonel Olcott's travels as described in Olcott's old diary leaves. Last month we found HPB and Colonel Olcott visiting the palace complex of Suraj Mul. From there, they traveled on to Agra, home of the Taj Mahal, where they heard about a yogi who was proficient in the practice of samadhi. And so we're going to have 3 readers. We need 3 readers, but we'll just we'll choose them one by one because I have comments in between. So can we get a reader for this first section?
Okay, please go ahead, Walter.
Yes. In the presence and under the supervision of our informant, he had been entombed 27 days, and in the presence of hundreds of eyewitnesses had been disentombed. The ears, nostrils, and other orifices of his body had been stopped with ghee, and the tongue turned back into the pharynx. At his resuscitation, the refilling of the lungs with air was accompanied with a wheezing sound like the letting of steam into a radiator. The incident can be attested by many living witnesses of credibility. Mohindranath Babu tells us of another yogi whose forehead glows with spiritual light, Tajasa, when he sits in contemplation.
Thanks, Walter. So around the same time, there's an entry dated June 23rd. And we need a reader for this, please.
Michael, can you read for us, please?
Okay. There are several entries in my diary about helping HPB to write her new book on theosophy. On 23rd May, it seems she broke ground for it. On the 24th, I gave her, by request, the skeleton outline of a book embodying such crude ideas as suggested themselves to one who did not intend to be the writer of it. On the 25th, I helped in preparing the preface. On 4th June, we finished it, and that seed lay in the mummy's hand 5 or 6 years before it sprouted as the Secret Doctrine, for which the only thing I then did was to invent the title and write the original prospectus. After coming to Bombay, I had quite enough common routine work to do without helping to write another book of cyclopedic bulk.
So when I was reading this in the old diary leaves, I realized that we are just a few days from the 130th anniversary of the writing of the Secret Doctrine. She wrote it in 1888, and it says here that she broke ground on May 23rd. So 3 days from now will be the 130th anniversary of the beginning of the writing of this amazing book. Okay, thanks, Michael. And we have one last entry here. So we need a reader for this, please.
Asha, can you read that for us, please?
Yeah. Our acquaintance with the editor of the famous opposition journal of Calcutta, the Amrita Bazar Patrika, began with a letter that we received from him on the 12th of May. He had read a report of my Framji Kawasji Hall lecture and asked our friendship. The correspondence eventuated in his coming over from Calcutta to see us. As he was so sincerely interested in our interpretations and defense of his sacred books, HPB did some few phenomena for him. For instance, pulled some black hair from her own head, rang the astral bells, and 8th of September, my diary records, duplicated in his presence and at his request a magic mirror with a black frame and handle that she had received today from a master. I was present, and thus was it done. He was to leave in 2 days and begged her to show him the phenomenon of duplication so that he might fully comprehend her teaching as to the nature of matter and force and their potential relations to the power of a trained will. She persistently refused for some time, but finally, when he caught up the mirror in question and asked her to duplicate that, she said she would if he would promise not to bother with any more such requests. He promising, she took the mirror in her hand, rose from her chair, turned her back upon us, and in another moment threw on the seat 2 identical glasses. Then, exhausted, she dropped into her seat and sat silent for some minutes to recover herself. Shashir Babu is happily still living and will be able to set me right if I have made any mistake in telling the story.
Thank you. So this is actually a photo of this. Is as far as I'm able to tell, the giveaway was Shashir Babu. So it's since it's the founder of the Amrita Bazaar Patrika, I'm pretty sure this is the man. Okay. Since it's been a couple of months, let's do a quick review of the Esoteric Catechism that we began studying during our last webinar. This is, we'll probably be spending the entire webinar looking into this. Scott, would you be willing to give this a shot? Would you be willing to read this, please?
Sure, the whole thing?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. What is it that ever is? Space, the eternal Anupadaka.
You know what?
What?
I'm going to ask the questions here, just to give us a sense of dialogue.
I think that's better.
Yeah. So, what is it that ever is?
Space, the eternal Anupadaka.
What is it that ever was?
The germ in the root.
What is it that is ever coming and going?
The great breath.
Then there are 3 eternals?
No, the 3 are one. That which ever is one. That which ever was is one. That which is ever being and becoming is also one. And this is space.
Explain, O Lanu.
The one is an unbroken circle, or ring, with no circumference, for it is nowhere and everywhere. The one is the boundless plane of the circle, manifesting a diameter only during the Manvantaric periods. The one is the indivisible point found nowhere, perceived everywhere during those periods. It is the vertical and the horizontal, the father and the mother, the summit and base of the father, the 2 extremities of the mother, reaching in reality nowhere, for the one is the ring, as also the rings that are within that ring. Light and darkness and light, the breath which is eternal. It proceeds from without inwardly, when it is everywhere, and from within outwardly, when it is nowhere. It expands and contracts, exhalation and inhalation. When it expands, the mother diffuses and scatters. When it contracts, the mother draws back and ingathers. This produces the periods of evolution and dissolution, Manvantara and Pralaya. The germ is invisible and fiery. The root, the plane of the circle, is cool. But during evolution and Manvantara, her garment is cold and radiant. Hot breath is the father, who devours the progeny of the many-faced element, heterogeneous, and leaves the single-faced ones, homogeneous. Cool breath is the mother, who conceives, forms, brings forth, and receives them back into her bosom, to reform them at the dawn of the day of Brahma, or Manvantara.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, I want to do a quick review, and then we'll move on from where we left off in the last webinar. So, the first exchange between Master and Lanu is, what is it that ever is? Space. The eternal Anupadaka is the answer. Anupadaka means parentless, you may remember, which suggests that it is self-produced or spontaneously generated. Thus, it stands at the highest, most causal level of manifestation. HPB says, space, viewed as a substantial unity, the living source of life, is the unknown causeless cause. And space is called the mother before its cosmic activity, and father mother at the first stage of reawakening. Okay, here's the next exchange. What is it that ever was? The germ in the root. HPB tells us the germ is invisible and fiery. The root, the plane of the circle, is cool, but during evolution and Manvantara, her garment is cold and radiant. Once we begin reading the stanzas of Zahn, we'll be exploring this concept of germ and root in much greater depth. Okay, the dialogue continues. What is it that is ever coming and going? The great breath. HPB says, the great breath is the fons et origo, the source and origin of force and of all individual consciousness, and supplies the guiding intelligence in the vast scheme of cosmic evolution. We'll be looking at the great breath pretty much for the rest of this section on this esoteric commentary. The next exchange catches us up to where we were at the end of the last webinar, so we can open things up for discussion. Then there are three eternals? No, the three are one. That whichever is one. That whichever was is one. That which is ever being and becoming is also one. And this is space. Okay, this is mind-bending stuff. If anyone has any comments, I'll make a few comments here, but think about it. Raise your hand if you have any questions, comments about this material. So, you'll notice this passage is a reference to the three phases of time: ever is, ever was, and ever becoming, right? Referencing the unity of these three phases of time has the effect of pitching us beyond the time continuum altogether. Then identifying this temporal unity as space, which is described as the living source of life and the unknown causeless cause, affirms what Einstein later proved, which is the inherent unity of what came to be known as the time-space continuum. It also turns the Lanu's answer into something of a Zen koan, which, as we know, uses language to pitch our consciousness beyond the confines of dualistic thinking. Of course, all language can hope to do is to stimulate our intuition, thus creating a kind of nonverbal understanding and stretching us into the realm of the higher mind. That's its entire purpose. So anyone have any thoughts or questions about the material thus far? It's the most profound, fundamental, esoteric material. I see Rose has her hand up.
Yes, and she's self-muted.
Hi, Francis.
Hi, Rose.
Can you put back up the slide that we just read? I have a comment about space.
Sure, is it here?
No, the one with the dialogue.
Oh, the whole dialogue, yeah, sure. No problem.
That one. The that which ever is one, that which is ever being and becoming is also one, and this is space. I want to read a quote that the Tibetan said about what a human being really is, and it might be familiar to some people, but he says, you know, at first we know we're not the body, we're not the mind, but we're life itself. And he says, and then we realize we're the monad. But he says we are a point of divine dynamic will focused in the soul, arriving at awareness of being through the use of form. He is will, the ruler of time, and the organizer in time of space.
Okay, that's a great quote and so relevant. Thank you, Rose. That's terrific. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about that, or did you just want to read it?
Well, and then he goes on to say that he realizes that time and space are the divine playthings and can be used or not at will.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like all of creation, that space is the product of the necessity product of will in order to manifest through form. It's not really real because he says he's the ruler of time and the organizer of space. The ruler, in time of space. So they're just divine playthings, and it goes to, you know, all is one, but yet are we the creator, or are we the playthings of a greater creator? Or
Right.
just some thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, first of all, there's two ways of looking at space. In fact, there's probably many levels of it. But this this level of space that he's talking about is what both DK and Blavatsky called the boundless immutable principle, or absolute reality, right? So this is that level of being that we eventually identify with. It is the one life, right? And then there's this space that manifests during the Manvantara that, in a sense, divides itself off from time, but that's the illusion. It's seen as something other than time, but in fact, as Einstein literally proved, is a function. They're functions of each other, right? So yeah, this ultimate space is not in fact a plaything, because it is that which does the playing. It is, you know, it is the great manipulator, you could say, from third rate point of view. But space, as it is usually seen, is the environment, or the ultimate form aspect, you know. So some thoughts about that. Anybody else? Thanks so much, Rose. That was really a useful quote. I appreciate it.
I don't see
anyone?
any. Oh, there we go.
Okay, good. Michael. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay,
Michael?
you're self-muted, Michael. Go ahead.
I thought maybe I would relate a story that Laurel told me about when she had an experience some years ago. She underwent a great amount of depression. Her first husband was killed, and in this experience, there were several factors to it, but about space itself. She asked what became of her first husband, and she talked as though she was given a tour of the multiverse, which was mind-blowing, essentially. And her first husband was part of that multiverse. And then she asked, like, well, is there life out there? Because, space, the multiverse. And she said what she got back was a cosmic belly laugh, like, you poor child. It's not only alive, but it is life itself.
Yeah, it's the manifesting side of the one life, isn't it?
So, and that's what we all are.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, we're spark from the fire. We're drops in the ocean of that is the one life. Which referencing Rose's quote, it's really about self-realization rather than becoming.
Exactly. Yeah.
The becoming really is recognizing.
Recognizing what we already are.
That's
and
it.
Always have been.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so let me get back to where we were here.
Okay, we have another question. Let me just figure out. Oh, there we go. Hi, Jeff. Go ahead, please.
Hi everyone.
Hey,
Okay,
Jeff.
yes, the germ in the root is quite intriguing. What is the
Is that-
germ in the root?
Yeah. Well, we're going to be looking at that in depth, but just as a quick answer, I sense there was some rhetorical quality to your question, but that's never held me back. It's kind of the ultimate masculine and feminine coming together, as you could look at it in a sense as the totality of the great breath, and the out breath is the male, or the germ aspect, the fiery aspect, and that the end breath is has more to do with the withdrawing feminine aspect, or the radiance. But we'll be looking at that.
Yep.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay.
Do you want to say any more about that? It was about the.
Well, it's one of those intriguing pieces of symbolism, isn't it? And it's
yeah.
When you ponder that sort of stuff, it kind of takes you deep inside, and you've got to start peeling stuff away, don't you? Until you've sort of reduced down to that kind of formula, and it's to me that's the ways and means of in which we're connected to this sense of this one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We're the germ and the root.
Yeah. Having a recognition of your own source is inherently dual, and realizing that, from just the most obvious aspect, that the form and spirit aspect are definitely connected with the germ and the root quality. So it's our inherent duality. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so let me find my place here. All right, here we go. So the source of these highly charged old commentaries is a symbolic language called Senzar, whose characters are literally charged with the potency of the concepts they represent. What you're looking at on your screen is not actual Senzar. And those who have access to this symbolic language, such as the Master DK, who was, we're told, one of the half a dozen or so sources for the Secret Doctrine, also have the advanced consciousness necessary to experience these energies and thus to be able to interpret Senzar. But even they, at their august level of consciousness, while contemplating the highest symbols in the Senzar lexicon, would be incapable of having a direct experience of the absolute, of space as it has here been described. So now for the next segment of the dialogue. The previous exchange was, then there are three eternals? No, the three are one. That whichever is one. That whichever was is one. That which is ever being and becoming is also one. And this is space. So now we come to the next section. And let's get a reader for this few lines here.
Okay. Claudia, can you read for us, please?
Explain, O Lanu, disciple. The one is an unbroken circle, ring, with no circumference. It is the nowhere and the everywhere. The one is the boundless plane of the circle, manifesting a diameter only during the Mantavataric periods. The one is the indivisible point found nowhere, perceived everywhere during those periods. It is the vertical and the horizontal, the father and the mother, the summit and the base of the father, the two extremities of the mother, reaching into reality nowhere. For the one is the ring, as also the rings that are within that ring.
Okay, thank you. So, whereas the last exchange concerned itself with the three aspects of time as a unity, what do we see here? This changes the focus, doesn't it? It moves us entirely onto geometrical elements. The circle, the plane of the circle, the point, the diameter, vertical and horizontal lines, right? Each symbolic of a specific concept. By the way, because they're so primal, I believe these symbols are actual Senzar characters, less that vibrational inherent quality that is able to evoke meaning to someone at a level of consciousness able to read them. But nonetheless, the symbols themselves, I think, very well may be Senzar characters. At any rate, let's revisit what these geometrical elements stand for as presented in the language of this catechism. So first we have the circle. Back there. In the very first paragraph of the Proem, we have this definition. The one circle is divine unity from which all proceed, whither all returns. Okay, but why a circle? Of course, we can't really know why, but there are a couple of inherent qualities that might qualify the circle to represent divine unity. First, it's the only geometrical figure made up of a single unvarying line. But if we go a little deeper, we see that this unvarying uniform arc is constantly turning on itself and returning to itself. Thus, it both holds space and suggests motion. Not the kind of A to B motion that we normally think of, but rather a sense of inherent motion that could be seen as standing in a causal relationship to time, which conditions normal motion, a kind of standing in a causal level to what we normally think of as motion. So any thoughts about this? This idea of a circle and why it is chosen or has been chosen to represent the divine, or perhaps not really chosen, but why something in it inherently suits it so well to represent divine unity. Any thoughts about that? Anybody?
I don't see anybody jumping forward.
Yeah.
Here we go. Here we go.
Oh, yeah. Great. Jeff. I'm sorry, I keep calling on people. Sorry, I'm not going to take your job, Yale.
No, I was trying. You're self-muted. Go ahead, please, Jeff.
There you go. Well, yes, because these things always represent a factor of a ring past not.
Mm-hmm.
And given we're dealing with this factor of creation, you know, this is the area of space that's marked for a particular quality of manifestation. You know, this the creative process, and I mean, we replicate this really too, don't we? I mean, we choose some elements when we're creating something that we will put together or arrange in a particular way, and I suppose this is the divine mind in its own creative function, choosing an area of space. You know, I don't know if the so-called God actually functions in that way, but there seems to be something to this. You know, when you look at even, say, like, because, you know, this whole work to me is about the creation of Earth, the Earth scheme, a realm of space chosen, and within that, the creative work and elements, you know, take on a particular form and are developed in the way that they have.
Yeah, right off the bat, we're stuck with a duality, aren't we? Even though this is totally homogeneous, uniform figure, it's still set off from the background. So, like you say, it has delineated or has marked out this area, right? I've heard it, I think somewhere on territory we've been across in the Secret Doctrine, she calls it the realm of divine ideation, right? Which, you know, brings in that quality. But, and yet, this is also called the absolute boundless all, right? It's the absolute. So what it really comes down to is there's no symbol that can actually show us the absolute. And this is as close as we can come to representing divine unity. You know, I mean, even the concept of unity is itself demarks a quality, you know. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I suppose that's the enigma of the whole phenomena of what we're involved in here too, isn't it? That there wasn't any beginning or end, or there is no other. And yet there are many others, you know. And there's this function of creation that is continuous, ever has been, ever will be.
Yeah.
Regardless, and the entire space, which is boundless, is in fact one creative act as well. But that's the paradox we have to, in some way, resolve.
Yeah, and we get a little help in this next section. So
we have
this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Let's take comments first.
Okay, I have a comment and then I have quite a few hands. So let's say Suzanne says, when we consider the circle, do we also consider it to be a globe? And if so, does this change our concepts?
Well, the three-dimensionality is a definite step into manifestation. That is actually the function of the third logos, that actually creates time and space as we know it, right? And that's where the globe would come in. This represents not a globe, but a a philosophical concept that stands at a causal relationship to that globe of space, as it were. This is going to be a little clearer in the next part of the dialogue, but yes, anyone else?
Yes, Walter, please go ahead.
Yeah, well,
Yes, about why the circle is a good symbol for divine unity. That kind of gets into the sacred geometry that of webinars that were done have been done before. Like, there are a number of interesting properties about the circle, like a single edge that doesn't have a beginning or end, and the boundary is equidistant from the center, and there's infinite lines of symmetry, and that it can't be really distorted or changed by rotating it, or you can't really like knock over a circle. It just rolls with it.
Yeah, it's a very good point. It is, in terms of all the geometry that we are familiar with, there is nothing more inherently unified in the way that we depict the form itself, is there? So I get into that a little bit as we go into this next section. Anyone else? Thanks.
Yes, two more. Scott, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Scott.
Can you hear me?
Yes, a little closer or louder.
Okay. What I bring into this, looking at this, is the factor of pi. The factor, this transcendental function of pi. This is the relationship of the circumference to the diameter, or 0 to 1, if you wish. And you find pi in the circumference of a circle, you find it in the area of the circle, and you find it in the volume of the sphere, and different relationships. So there's something, again, in looking at the circumference of a circle, you can either know its diameter or its circumference, but you can't know both.
Right.
There's a transcendental quality to this. There's something, a union of spirit and matter of opposites here that are together in the circle that create it and measure it, if you will.
Indeed. And it defines, even within the realm of geometry, the creative function, doesn't it? It's, this is the means by which, this gives us a divine metaphor, as it were. Now, that's not good enough. The divine method that manifestation is able to actually occur is this relationship that Scott brings forward. Right?
The triangle is born in this circle, which is the first figure.
Exactly. You inherent in this circle are, in fact, all other geometrical forms, and the first of those is the triangle. Indeed. Right. Thank you. Yes. Anyone else?
Yes, Michael, please go ahead. You're self-muted. There.
Okay. As I look at this, it is a symbol from which the law of cycles periodicity expresses. And like, I forget who was talking about with the globe, I can look at this and see a sphere rising up off of the paper. As a two-dimensional object, it's, it can be, lead to confusion. But also, as I look at the strip separating the black background from the white circle, that strip could be a Mobius strip, which turns once so that there's only one side to it. As you follow it around, are people familiar with Mobius strip?
Well, I am. We can't really take a poll at this point, but I think
Yeah,
many
but-
of us are.
Yeah, but so there's no inside or outside. There's just one side to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Michael. It's inherently suggestive of all potential. As Michael said, we can easily imagine a globe coming forth from this, right? And it also has a sense of inherent motion. As I mentioned, it seems to be causal to motion, the movement of the unbroken movement of the line suggests a cause, or at least it stands in a causal relationship to motion. Do we have any other comments?
No, that's it for now.
Okay, I'd like to move on to this. So, okay, that's fine as far as it goes. Everything we discussed about a finite circle. But this occult dialogue takes the concept of a circle a step further. Quote, the one is an unbroken circle with no circumference. Here's where the Zen koan aspect comes in. A circle with no circumference. The idea demands that we move to a place beyond finite conception, to a place of circleness rather than some literal circle. But if there's no circumference, why use the metaphor of a circle at all? Well, as we've been discussing, perhaps this divine circle with no circumference still possesses certain qualities of a circle's unique order and rhythm, for example, or its inherent organization. Perhaps its unwavering orientation towards the central point, or the sense of inherent equidistance. All present in those circles we know. Certainly the circle, even as we know it, carries the potency of unity. And also note the lack of an illustration and how you're going to depict a circle with no circumference, right? The second half of this sentence, for it is nowhere and, oops, go too quickly there. Yeah, down at the bottom. For it is nowhere and everywhere, tells us that this divine circle exists beyond the realm of spatial coordinates, right? And yet something of the quality conditions all manifestations. Now, if we add the divine circle's defiance of spatial location to the earlier stated transcendence of time, the one that ever was, is, and will be, we have a description of that which stands actually beyond description, beyond the two fundamental parameters, time and space, that allows us to cognize and recognize, right? The only possible conclusion is what we've been told all along, that this level of reality cannot be grasped by the lower mind, certainly can't be illustrated, but more importantly, it transcends the function of the inherent object-subject that the lower mind works with. Now, the next phrase, quote, the one is the boundless plane of the circle, manifesting a diameter only during manvantaric periods, is further described in this quote a few pages on. The eternity of the universe in total is a boundless plane. Periodically, the playground, and hey, I think this is, somebody just quoted this, like Rose, the playground of numberless universes incessantly manifesting and disappearing, okay? This is the philosophical nature of the diameter, the great mother of, quote, numberless universes. It's the second logos, two being the root, though not the direct agent of all manifestation. Any thoughts up to this point?
I don't see any yet.
Okay, and then we have, all part of the same sentence, mind you, this phrase.
I'm sorry, we just got a hand.
Okay, jump up.
Go ahead, Jeff. Yourself.
Yeah, just trying to make a distinction here, which is so subtle, but this, we have space and we have the void of space. And this void is kind of, the real blackness of the whole thing that's beyond conception. Whereas this circle is bringing this into a more local type of hemisphere.
Yeah, the delineated circle. But what about this circle that has circumference nowhere, right? And everywhere. And it starts to, assume more the qualities of, it's just a metaphor, folks. This is a sand castle, not a real castle, right? It's what they talk about, the Buddha, the finger pointing at the moon. It's a Buddha saying, right? That don't mistake the finger for the moon. When you see that, that's what we're looking at here. This circle is the sand castle. It's the finger pointing at the moon. It's not the moon. And yet, if you imagine a circle with no circumference and whose central point is everywhere and circumference nowhere, it does pitch us towards, what you're talking about, Jeff, this absolute void of being, right? Yeah.
That's all, yeah.
Yeah. So we have as part of the same sentence, and so the same concept. The one is the indivisible point found nowhere, perceived everywhere during those periods, meaning periods of manifestation. So this is similar to the circumference, also found everywhere and nowhere, but adds the idea of perception, right? Perceived everywhere during those periods. It's like it was, they sneaked it in there.
Francis?
So, yeah.
Scott.
Let me finish this line, please.
Okay.
Perceives the point during manifestation, perceived everywhere, which in turn introduces the idea of a perceiver and thus of consciousness. We might see this as the first reference to the point of light within the mind of God, divine mind, capable of self-perception. Okay, go ahead.
Scott has his hand up. Scott, Scott, please go ahead.
Sure. I'm just struck by this, looking at a circle whose circumference is nowhere and whose point is center is everywhere, and yet by Euclidean geometry, a diameter by definition passes through the center of a circle and extends to one side of the circumference and to the other side. How do you do that?
Well, it's interesting because a little further on, it says, in fact, we're right there. So let's go there, just in answer to your question. It is the vertical and the horizontal, the father and the mother, the summit and the base of the father, the two extremities of the mother, reaching in reality nowhere. Right? For the one is the ring, as also the rings that are within that ring. So in case you didn't have enough on your plate, here's a whole bunch more stuff, right? But it does give us new ways to look at what is essentially incognizable. Please don't imagine that sense that you have inside right now, which is that you're not getting this at all, that there's anybody else who is getting this. No one is getting this. You cannot, quote, get, unquote, that which cannot be cognized by the mind. As I mentioned earlier, even a master of wisdom in deep contemplation cannot actually have a direct experience of this level of reality. So all of this is a method of pitching us towards these realities, right? The reason this whole section was called the Proem is because in the ancient Greek, the Proem meant that which stimulates the intuition. So that's its purpose, you know. So we just direct our imagination in combination with our intelligence towards the inherent glass ceiling of our lower mentality, but with the hope of breaking that ceiling, right?
And you're dealing with the ring that's incognizable, with a capital R, and then bringing it down into rings that we can use as metaphor.
Yeah. That's it. That's it. That's what we do. But it's not a random choice of metaphor, is it? You know, no. I mean, it's at all. It's that which really does have a linking path up, you know, into higher mind. So the summit and the base of the Father could be seen as referencing, for instance, the first and third logi, right, which are both unmanifest. The two extremities in the mother might suggest the highest and lowest planes of manifestation. The ring has many connotations. It's, I think it was Michael that pointed out that it can represent cycles of time and the inherent ring pass-knots of units of consciousness, which also nest inside of each other, right? In fact, that's the law of the universe, right? That greater ring pass-knots are made up of lesser ones. So, any thoughts about any of these? We have a horizontal, a vertical, horizontal representing the feminine aspect, the horizontal, the masculine, and then the rings, which are really the source of the horizontal and vertical. Any thoughts?
I don't see any additional hands or comments at this time.
Okay, that's fine. Okay.
Oh, just got a new hand.
All right. That usually will do it.
Go ahead, Jeff, please.
Yes, you can't let this go without some sort of comment, do we?
No, absolutely not.
So these are like two axes that have appeared mysteriously in this phenomena. And, you know, like you're saying, you know, we refer to one as spirit and one as matter. You know, we're sort of in our capacity, in our human capacity to try to understand this phenomena, we're applying these words and ideas to something that's, of course, cannot be understood.
Yeah.
But there you go. What else do we have?
That's right.
There isn't. Yes. You know, like if somehow we were to try to explain this, this is really, we would always reduce it down to these sort of formulas, wouldn't we? Mm. And there isn't any other way.
No, in fact, it's been done universally, you know, around the world, that the deeper philosophies independently have come up with these same geometries to just try to describe that which is into, you know, beyond cognition, right? For instance, you know, with this vertical, just the idea of this vertical and horizontal that you were referencing, you know, well, for the vertical to suggest spirit, we have to have another concept in place, which is an up and down hierarchy, a vertical hierarchy, right? Which, you know, for instance, in DK's charts, you know, he shows us a kind of vertical hierarchy. But he's the first to say that this is just for the convenience of reference. That you know, and another way of looking at it is the within, moving within, you know, as opposed to without. And it's just another method of direction, which is another metaphor for trying to describe the absolute, right? But just so you're aware, this idea of the vertical and the horizontal is itself dependent on a metaphor that we've put in place, you know, the above and the below, the hierarchy. That term itself means, you know, to stand in a higher relationship too, right? So just, you know, we all have to keep that in our understanding.
Yeah, and there are other references to the line and other aspects of this work to us as well, like in the foreman, isn't he? The line always represents a two-dimensional object or a factor of 2 dimensions or of time, from a point from this to that is a line from here to there. A division of some sort. There's so many things, isn't there?
Yeah. Yeah, I think everybody is at least familiar with this idea of the Flatlanders, you know, this two-dimensional world, you know, where they try to discover that which lies beyond their world, but they're incapable of understanding 3 dimensions. And of course, it's just a very effective way for us to extend that to the next level, which is trying to go beyond our 3 dimensions and to understand that. And that's exactly what we're doing here, right? Anything we use is going to be a metaphor. And yet, that, you know, that doesn't mean that we should be dismissive of it, because these metaphors have been chosen with care and through the intuition down the ages. Right?
So the symbol before is a dimensionless point.
Right.
And now we have the factor of dimension coming into this.
Right, that's right. Yeah, we're moving further into dimensionality, right? Yeah. Okay, any other comments? Thanks, Jeff.
Yes, Michael has his hand up.
Go ahead, Michael.
Okay. From the field of the unmanifest, the manifest is created, which then becomes the circle as a symbol. But there's still not a duality as we might think of. That's where the masculine and the feminine as a duality come into play, the vertical and the horizontal. And those would be shown within the circle rather than within the field of the unmanifest, bearing in mind that the manifest within that circle that is symbolized here is not manifest as we would consider it.
Right, exactly. It's the ideation of manifestation, the precursor, right?
So,
and any time, this is kind of across the board, whatever you see, for instance, a horizontal or a vertical, bound by a circle, it suggests its relationship to spirit. When you see it separate, well, it could mean anything at all, right? But I'm showing these separate because that's the language that's given here, is the vertical and the horizontal. In fact, you would see them bound by a circle, right? Because it's all, at this point, about the relationship to the circle. And yet, this is a circle without a circumference, whose central point is everywhere. Therefore, you're still in with the vertical. Therefore, I should say, therefore, both the vertical and the horizontal also are nowhere and everywhere, because they must follow the parameters of the circle that binds them. right? So they become, you might say, an energetic of a particular quality. Actually, you know, this stands beyond the realm of quality, which is, but you know, you're just like, what are you going to do? We're stuck with language, right? So these two concepts are the energetic representations of the masculine and feminine principles. So with that in mind, let's move on to the next segment. Let's see, where was I? Right. The Lanu's next line is light in darkness, and darkness in light. The breath which is eternal, it proceeds from without inwardly when it is everywhere, and from within outwardly when it is nowhere. Okay, our Lanu has to this point described the absolute in terms of time and in terms of geometry. Now he describes it in terms of direction and motion. And he links this directed motion to both light and dark and the great breath. One of the great potencies of the old commentary is its economy of expression, how much is communicated in so few words. Of course, that also means that you have to go back in and unpack it, right? So let's do that. Let's take a closer look. First of all, by linking direction, the great breath, and light and dark, our Lanu is suggesting that these three are essentially one, and that they only become aspects of the one during manifestation. Direction is a deeply occult concept, but one association we can easily make is its use as a metaphor for involutionary and evolutionary periods. So, because nowhere suggests that which is beyond time and space, we can read, it proceeds from within outwardly when it is nowhere. See, the nowhere is the key here, as the involutional outbreath. And because everywhere suggests 3D space, we can read, it proceeds without inwardly when it is everywhere, as being associated with an evolutionary in-breath, that which takes us back to the source. Okay, HPB's writings on this subject generally bear out this point of view, but in her first footnote, she introduces a consideration that reverses these directions, as though this material weren't difficult enough, right? So let's take a look at the footnote and then try to sort it out. Can we get a reader for this footnote?
Okay, let's see. Rose, can you read for us, please? You're self-muted.
Yes. Do I read the bottom part or the top part?
Actually, read them both, if you would, just to read. We've had these definitions before, but I think it would be useful to get them again. They pop up in the text.
So the Maha Manvantara, Sanskrit from Maha, great, plus Manvantara, a period of manifestation, a great cycle of cosmic manifestation and activity, whether of a universe, solar system, or planet. The Maha Manvantara of a solar system or life of Brahma is a period of...
That's trillion.
300. Thank you for counting the zeros for me. 311 trillion 40 billion
Yes.
terrestrial years.
Good one.
Pralaya, Sanskrit term, the state of latency or rest between two manvantaras or great life cycles.
Okay, so go ahead with the footnote.
esoteric philosophy regarding as Maya, or the illusion of ignorance, every finite thing must necessarily view in the same light every intra-cosmic planet and body as being something organized, hence finite. The expression, therefore, quote, it proceeds from without inwardly, etc., unquote, refers to the first portion of the sentence, to the dawn of the Maha Manvantaric period, or the great re-evolution after one of the complete periodical dissolutions of every compound form in nature from planet to molecule into its ultimate essence or element. And in its second portion, to the partial or local Manvantara, which may be a solar or even planetary one. Secret Doctrine, page 11.
Thanks, Rose. Okay, clear as mud, right? Yeah, this is a toughie. And since I had trouble understanding this footnote on my first couple of reads, let me rephrase this, what she says here and in the next footnote. I try to make sense of it. So what she's saying is, at the dawn of a Maha Manvantara, following an absolute pralaya, all substance consists, we're told, as one completely undifferentiated element, spread, and here's the point, spread equally throughout the newly initiated universe. Thus, in order for further differentiation to take place, this newly formed substance proceeds from without inwardly in order to coalesce from its state of uniform dispersal into, galaxies, suns, planets, etc. But during minor pralayas, substance, we're told, does not dissolve into a single undifferentiated element, but is as though frozen until a subsequent Manvantara. She's about to tell us this in the next footnote. Therefore, it begins its resurrection to life from within outwardly, because the form aspect is already frozen in place. This point of view is described more fully. In fact, she even repeats some of the things I said, but I wanted to integrate it for you. So let's go to the next footnote. And if somebody could read this, please.
By center, a center of energy or a cosmic focus is meant when the so-called creation or formation of a planet is accomplished by that force which is designated by the occultists life and by science energy. Then the process takes place from within outwardly, every atom being said to contain in itself creative energy of the divine breath. Hence, whereas after an absolute pralaya, or when the pre-existing material consists but of one element, and breath is everywhere, the latter acts from without inwardly, after a minor pralaya, everything having remained in status quo, in a refrigerated state, so to say, like the moon at the first flutter of Manvantara. The planet of planets, all planets, begin their resurrection to life from within outwardly.
Okay. Hopefully you got some sense of that. So let's get back to the Lanu's explanation. And what should help throw some further light. This is short, so I'll read it. It expands and contracts, exhalation and inhalation. Because remember, we're still talking about the great breath here in all of this. When it expands, the mother diffuses and scatters. When it contracts, the mother draws back and ingathers. This produces the periods of evolution and dissolution, Manvantara and Pralaya. So now it seems that the direction of the great breath is back on track. This out breath, moving from within outward, initiates a manvantara, or the lesser cycles. Only in a maha manvantara do you have this equal dispersion of the one element that reverses the direction. Quite odd, but there you have it. Here's a list of terms and symbols related to the two aspects of the great breath. We have manifestation, dissolution, creation, withdrawal, manvantara, pralaya, evolution, involution, expansion, contraction, exhalation, inhalation, from within outwards, from without inwards, and the mother diffuses and scatters, the mother draws back and ingathers. So hopefully that helps. These two aspects of the great breath, seen as one, could be illustrated by the yin-yang symbol. In fact, that's probably the highest possible use of this symbol in its toto, then representing the great breath. Okay, now into the next statement in the line. Does anybody have any thoughts or would like to comment on what we've been looking at here? It's most particularly to this from within outwards and from without inwards, normally associated with involution and evolution. Any thoughts at all? Any comments about this idea?
I don't see anything so far, but I just wanted to say that on a much smaller scale than what you're talking about here, I see those same relationships in the cycles of Jupiter and Saturn. Jupiter is that expansion and Saturn is the contraction. And I've always thought of them as that in-breathing and the out-breathing. Both of them are crucial parts of our planetary makeup and our evolution, and they're just on, as above, so below, or just on a much smaller scale than what you're talking about here. So, okay.
Well, yeah, but absolutely relevant to the solar system. It's funny when you're talking about the entire solar system as a smaller scale. We're thinking large, right? It's also interesting to be able to think of the rays associated, because you have basically the two rays that enable manifestation, the second and the third, in comparison to the first, represented, right? And therefore the feminine and masculine qualities, but interestingly reversed, because the second, which we would normally think of as being related to the second logos and the diameter, is the expansive aspect. So that suggests, see, going back here to our list, that's the manifesting aspect, right? The mother diffuses and scatters, or from within outwards, right? It's an outward quality. And then the Saturnian aspect during manifestation is to suggest the contraction aspect. But it's also that third ray quality. Interesting, just to pitch that in. It's not a straight analogy, but second and third ray are definitely there in the mix. Thanks for that. I think that's very insightful.
Okay, and now you have a couple of other hands up. Let's go with Walter first.
Yes, on this list, I see that it's listed that evolution is on the column aligned with manifestation, and that involution is aligned with the column of dissolution or withdrawal. And I'm wondering if some of these can be, if you looked at it in a different way, if they can be reversed. In other words, it seems like that involution is more of a manifestation or an out-breath or projection from the source, while the evolutionary process is the return of the life, or a more withdrawing inward and relinquishing matter in order to return to spirit or source.
Absolutely. I took this as a result of something that was said in the old commentary. But you know what? I think you're absolutely right. I think this should be reversed. You know, evolution is used in two ways. The evolution of a solar system is an involutionary process. You know, HPB actually describes the evolving forth of a solar system, you know, into the manifested realm. But it's not how we normally use evolution. We use it like you're talking about, which is that we evolve back towards the one life, right? So I think that's probably why I had them reversed, is this idea that the evolution of a solar system, you could say, into being, is in fact an involutionary process. And if you look at, for instance, involution in terms of some of these other qualities, like the mother drawing back and gathering within herself, it has an involutional sense to it. But you're right on. It's, yeah. It's another use of the word evolution. I don't know so much about another use of the word involution, but it's definitely another use of the word evolution. So yeah, thanks for that, Walter. You also see in here that I've overlaid two symbols, that there's the first and the third logos overlaid on the left, the symbols for them. And then on the right, the symbol for the absolute and for the second logos. And that's because one set of is considered masculine and one feminine. Thanks for pointing that out, Walter.
And then Scott has his hand up too.
Yeah, Scott, let's go back to the list.
Just a comment about Jupiter, Saturn, noting that Saturn is in fact in this solar system is certainly an expression of the first ray, not just the third. And so it does reverse it back to Father Mother, if you will, remembering that Saturn is the final resolving planet in the solar system. It is the first ray.
In that sense.
Aspect of dissolution.
So as a synthesizing planet, it takes on the quality of the first ray. I thought Uranus was the first ray planet in that sense.
It's true. But in the final resolution, doesn't it go back to Saturn?
BL?
I don't know. I think that has to do with the monadic rays of the planets, and I'm not so sure I'm up on all of that.
Oh.
Right. Well, you know, there's also this idea of two Saturns, but that doesn't answer the question, because one of those is going to be the synthesizing.
I think that is like the first and third there. We're talking about Saturn.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. All right. So, yeah. Okay. I'm not 100% on that. You know, it may be true. Because I know that Uranus is also a synthesizing planet, where the seventh becomes one. So I'm just not sure. We'd have to dig out. It's either in TCF or esoteric astrology. I like that, narrows it down.
It's an EA.
Yeah, okay. Right. Okay. So let's get back. This is the next part of the of this esoteric catechism. The germ is invisible and fiery. The root, the plane of the circle, is cool. But during evolution, see there, And Manvantara, her garment is cold and radiant. So, Walter, you see there how they're using evolution to mean coming into form. So it really is a different use of the word. So in order to get a better understanding of this fundamental duality that we've been talking about, right, that's represented by this list, let's take a look at a quote, some pages into the SD, that describes this, this duality. Can we get a reader for this, please?
Ninka, can you read for us, please? I don't hear her, so let's go to Scott. Can you read for us, please?
You want me to read?
Oh, okay. Okay. One of the symbolical figures for the dual creative power in nature, matter and force on the material plane, is Padma, the water lily of India. The lotus is the product of heat, fire, and water, vapor or ether. Fire standing in every philosophical and religious system as a representation of the spirit of deity, the active, male, generative principle. And ether, or the soul of matter, the light of the fire, for the passive feminine principle from which everything in this universe emanated. Hence, ether or water is the mother, and father is the fire. Fire is the father.
Well, I think both are true. Thank you. Okay, here's what HPB has to say about the germ, right? Remember, we're referencing this, the germ is invisible and fiery. The root is cool, but during evolution in Manvantara, her garment is cold and radiant. So we have this duality of germ and root that we're looking at right now. And let's get a reader.
Kay, can you read for us, please? Nope.
Kay, are you there? No. Okay.
Marianne, can you read for us, please?
Yes.
Thank
Can
you.
you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'll just get my glasses. The ray of the ever darkness becomes, as it is emitted, a ray of effulgent light or life, and flashes into the germ, the point in the mundane egg, represented by matter in its abstract sense. But the term point must not be understood as applying to any particular point in space, for the germ exists in the center of every atom, and these collectively form the germ. Or rather, as no atom can be made visible to our physical eye, the collectivity of these, if the germ can be applied to something which is boundless and infinite, forms the numeron.
Numenon.
Yeah, sorry, the light is very bad. It's off here. Of eternal and indestructible matter.
Thank you. So, the germ is the life principle that stands at the center of every atom of substance. Human being, planet, and sun, collectively constituting the one life. The feminine, receptive form aspect, the cool but radiant root, represented by the plane of the circle, is animated by the germ, the invisible fiery life principle. And in a nutshell, that describes manifested form. That's basically all what we know to be reality. Any thoughts about this?
I don't see any hands or questions at this point. Ah, there we go. Oops. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah. So this seems to be this factor of identification that's introduced here, and I mean that's the root at the center of any one thing, you know. And in this sense, it's a phenomenon, but it's even more than that. It's a function, and it also embraces this the realm of this concept of purpose. That nothing can exist that does not have a purpose.
Yeah. An aspect of the one life.
Yes. And this whole phenomena that we're investigating here, at the core of all this thing, there has to be some form of purpose, which, of course, this dot represents, this point.
Yeah.
This dimensionless point.
Right. It's the purpose of God, you know, which DK talks about. I remember a quote, something like, you know, that DK talking about in his deepest meditation, he'll get a little flash of what this purpose might be. Not a definition, but an energetic visitation, you might say. Of course, it's Shambhala. What it's coming through, and some sense of this divine purpose touches him. Now we're talking about a master of wisdom here, right? Who's completely beyond personality and is well on his way to identifying with the monad. And yet he has the briefest sensation of purpose, of the purpose of the divine. Right? So yeah, that's real first ray stuff.
And of course, this business of purpose is so obscure. I mean, it's so inherent in everything around us that one of the ways to try and comprehend that too is to try to create something that has no purpose. And this is impossible.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Interesting. Yeah. So, and you could also, you know, further say that any purpose, ultimately, it gains its sense from the one purpose, right?
Yeah.
So the purpose of being, no matter how you define it, is somehow animated, you know, by this point, which lies at the center of everything. Right? It's the point which is everywhere. And therefore that's the purposeful, animating quality, you know, that we relate to in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's certainly fascinating.
It's the best. The ray of the ever darkness. This is very telling too. You know, this is the germ. We're talking about this array and the germ are one. Oh no, wait a minute. It says flashes into the germ. So we're even stepping up a level here. Ray of the ever darkness becomes, as it is emitted, a ray of effulgent light or life, and flashes into the germ, the point in the mundane egg. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah.
And that's the function of identification.
Yeah.
You know, this sense of oneness that then divides itself in some way, but doesn't.
Yeah.
It's in everything, and it's in everywhere.
So identification is a kind of reverse engineering.
Yeah, function. A process, a function, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a thing, is it?
Of return, of trying to re-enter the point.
Now, of course, we have things that have served their purpose, and therefore, you know, they return to, you know, they're discarded, aren't they? As soon as something served its purpose, it's discarded. It's obsolete.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point, so to speak. Yeah, when it becomes, yeah, then it's, the form aspect is just left to disintegrate. And the purpose is re-identified or realigned or reassociated with something that is more like itself. That's why form it is in a process of ever conforming to the ideal, right? Because it's driven by this point of inner purpose. Yeah. Good stuff, Jeff. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, we have another hand up, but we also have a comment from Gary. He says, and he typed this when you and Jeff were talking, he says, desire forms. Now let me unmute him so he can elaborate.
Well, thanks for inviting me to elaborate. I'm not sure I particularly wanted to, but as an experiencer, someone that's had seen a light experience, left my body, and shortly followed by physical manifestation of a figure blowing a breath, a great breath, could it have been? Could also, I've viewed this figure as perhaps a temptation, and to be left with that thought for now 25 years.
Interesting.
As and founder of a production company called Toto. Listening to this today is amazingly, in my mind, you know, some synchronistic values, and it's very personal to me. So I'm not sure I can comment any more. It's just that the desire forms, you know, I saw this great breath, this figure emitting this great breath, you know, about 7 or 8 days, or I kept myself isolated after I'd had my seeing the light experience.
I see.
And that was back in 1993. A number that pops out a lot. Anyway, that's all.
Okay. Thanks, Gary, and welcome. Yeah, I am hoping you're, you know, that you'll stay with us. This is a 30-year program. That'll put me at age 100 when we finally wrap this up. So I hope you'll go the journey, as I hope all of you will. So you're very welcome. Thanks for joining us. And I'll comment on what you said, which the idea of that purpose and desire are attracted to each other, and through the you know, the law of magnetism, right? Through the law of attraction. And desire can be for, like it sounds like in your case, this figure that you saw, which evoked a desire in you. It could be a desire pitched towards the spirit and the spirit aspect, right?
Well,
so
it was
go ahead.
Yeah. I asked. It was as a result of me asking a direct question to spirit that the figure formed, and it was a question that I reminded the great spirit that when I saw the light, I said, "Look, I want to bring some good where there's bad." And that's when it happened. And when I saw the head, the figure blowing, I asked of spirit. I know I said I want to bring some good where there's bad, but what do I do? Yeah, that's precisely what I asked the spirit, and then this manifested in front of me. Okay, that's how it happened.
Oh, that's wonderful. The way I interpret that is, you know, Service, according to the Master Dwala Kul, is defined as the spontaneous effect of soul contact. So if indeed you had a vision of your soul or of something standing in for your soul, then that's soul contact. That's which then allows for you to have true service in whatever way, whatever is appropriate for your skill level. But it's that connection that makes it service, not what you do, right? It's not about the specific nature of the acts that you then carry out. It's about that contact and doing it from that awareness that makes it service, right? So that's just my interpretation. Thanks for sharing your light experience with us. It's beautiful.
No problem. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Yes, we have another comment, and then Michael's had his hand up for quite a while, so let's go to Michael. Oops, there you go, Michael.
Okay, I really like this paradox of matter in its abstract sense. Normally we think of matter as something concrete, but this is talking abstract. And as I think about this, this whole process is occurring and it hasn't even come into the cosmic logoic plane yet. It's way, way out there.
Yeah, I mean, we can't really say, when it touches, where it touches, since all of that is so far beyond us, but I'm with you on that we're at the very beginning levels, or maybe this is the cosmic Adi plane, the very highest of the highest. Who knows?
Yeah, as I think about it, it takes some manifestation to create the 7 cosmic planes, and there's perhaps something way beyond that.
Yeah, possibly so. Now, this symbol is actually recreated above. I'm now remembering. In fact, it's coming up. So I'm going to give you a little preview, guys, of what's coming because I want to go here. So here's what it looks like. You have this a cosmic Parabrahm on the cosmic Adi plane. So you would have, this is the relationship to this causeless calls, happening at the Adi plane. However, I've also seen the 3 logi standing above the throne of God. There's another chart that shows it that way. Anyway, yeah, we're talking about matter that is in the very highest states of tenuity. And I think that's what's meant by the horizontal axes, whose ends actually are nowhere. That's the breadth of the mother. The breadth of the mother is physical manifestation from highest to lowest. Strange, it's a strange mix of metaphors because you say from highest to lowest and you have this horizontal line, right, in the breadth of the mother. But it's the description of matter and from its most tenuous to its most concrete. So thank you, Michael.
And then Suzanne says the idea of non-purpose seems an illusion, as even in non-purpose is the idea of purposeful non-purpose. She says it's a minor point, but all is at the point.
Okay. Yeah, so purposeless or purposeful non-purpose. What was that phrase she said again? I got to get my head around that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Purposeful non-purpose.
Purposeful non-purpose. Well, okay. Non-purpose from the point of view of our ability to cognize the purpose, which is then, it basically suggests a line of descent of purpose. That's what I get from that phrase. So yes, thank you for that comment. All right, shall we move ahead back to,
Right,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I don't see anybody else.
Okay, so yeah. So we've come to the last two sentences of the Lanu's explanation, and therefore of the entire Esoteric Catechism. So I'm going to read this because we're running out of time here, and it's short. Hot breath is the father who devours the progeny of the many-faced element, heterogeneous, and leaves the single-faced ones, homogeneous. Cool breath is the mother who conceives, forms, brings forth, and receives them back into her bosom to reform them at the dawn of the day of Brahma or Manvantara. Okay, so we're still talking about the two aspects of the great breath, this essential duality, which has a twofold effect on the substantive realm. At the beginning of a Manvantara, it initiates creation, described as expansion from within outwards in the old commentary. But this statement describes the in-breath, the return to unity, thus through a somewhat colorful metaphor. We see diversity, the quote, many-faced element, returning to its essential nature, the single-faced ones. On a human scale, this suggests a return to the monad. Universally, it represents the end of a Manvantara, the bosom, actually the end of a Maha Manvantara, because we're talking about this single element, which only applies to these Maha Manvantaric cycles. The bosom of the mother, herein described, is the source of Akasha, the noumenon of substance. So, you know, we keep saying the same thing in many different ways, hopefully each time, you know, stimulating the intuition to have some actual understanding of this. So HP gives a rather cryptic explanation of this final sentence. She says, actually, let's get a reader for this.
Okay. Yvonne, can you read for us, please?
For clearer understanding on the part of the general reader, it must be stated that occult science recognizes 7 cosmical elements, 4 entirely physical, and the 5th, ether, semi-material, as it will become visible in the air towards the end of our 4th round, to reign supreme over the others during the whole of the 5th. The remaining 2 are as yet absolutely beyond the range of human perception. These latter will, however, appear as presentments during the 6th and 7th races of this round, and will become known in the 6th and 7th rounds respectively.
Thank you. So, what do these various levels of ether have to do with the dissolution of a Manvantara? Simply that they will increasingly come to more closely resemble the state of homogeneous substance that characterizes the beginning and end of a Maha Manvantara. That's why she's using this here as an explanation for this last part of the catechism. Actually, eventually she gets to describing that more directly. So, if we reference this chart found in a treatise on cosmic fire, we see that the 7 cosmical elements HP refers to are analogous to the matter found on the 7 cosmic planes. Yeah, Michael was just referencing that. But because she states that 4 of these elements are entirely physical, the 4th or lowest ether was accepted as a physical substance by many scientists in HPB's time, and that this lowest ether will be, quote, visible in the air at the end of the 4th round, she seems to be referring not to the elements found on the higher cosmic planes, but rather to the purely physical elements found on the physical subplane of the cosmic physical plane, which you see on your screen here, right? The lowest ethers, in other words. In fact, we know through DK's teachings that these 7 elements actually exist on 3 levels, including the systemic or planetary level there to the right, which we hadn't touched on yet. The importance of etheric vision coming to humanity later in this, the 4th round, lies in the fact that at least part of our energy bodies will become visible, which will revolutionize everything, basically. Medicine, psychology, education, our views on death, and all aspects of our daily human interaction. Just imagine the shift in emphasis when we can see the level of activity in each other's chakras. The whole concept of appearance will have a much deeper significance. So, and that's where we're going to draw the line here. We just crossed the hour and 45 minute, and I don't like to keep you. We're through the Esoteric Catechism, though she still talks about it in these next few footnotes, but they're deep and involved. So we will stop with this artistic rendition of etheric vision. And I want to thank you all so much. The hardcore group here, evolving towards the middle of the Proem of the Secret Doctrine. So, thank you for attending, and we'll see you next month. I think we're on for the 3rd Sunday of June, aren't we, BL? There's nothing interfering with that, I don't believe.
No, I don't believe there is. Let me just double check my calendar here.
Okay. We'll give you a date in a sec here.
Right, it's the 17th.
17th, so
17 June.
Just almost exactly a month and a day. And somehow silently, or with a great party, celebrate the commencement of the writing of the Secret Doctrine 3 days from now, the 130th anniversary of the beginning of the Secret Doctrine. Okay, that's it this time. Thank you all so much for joining the webinar. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Francis.
Everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.